I didn't just catch my fiancé cheating. I caught him using my car, the one I paid for, the one in my name, to drive across town to meet another woman's parents like he was auditioning to replace me. And the worst part, he had no idea I was watching him the entire time. The day everything fell apart started with something small, a missing car, a quiet afternoon, and a gut feeling so sharp it felt like something inside my chest was tearing open. I wasn't supposed to be home early that day. If I hadn't come back, I might have married him. Before I tell you what happened, let me introduce myself. My name is Ashley, and if you've ever trusted someone so deeply that betrayal felt like suffocating underwater, then you already know how this story feels. Stay with me, because what happened next didn't just change his life, it changed mine forever. 3 months before the wedding, I believed I had finally built the life I'd fought years for. I had a stable job as a financial analyst, a cozy townhouse I'd purchased entirely on my own, and a fiancé named Daniel who everyone described the same way. He's perfect for you. He had that kind of charm that melted people within minutes. He'd hold doors open, smile warmly, and say just the right thing at exactly the right time. Friends envied me. My parents adored him. Even strangers trusted him instantly. But behind that charm was something else, something subtle at first, something I didn't understand until it was too late. When we got engaged, he told me he was struggling financially. His startup had failed, he said. He had debts. He needed time to recover. I loved him, so I stepped in without hesitation. I covered most of the wedding expenses. I handled the bigger bills. When his car kept breaking down, I bought a new one. That car became our main vehicle, but legally it was entirely mine, my name on every document, my payments, my insurance. He used to joke about it. He'd laugh and say, "Technically it's yours, but we both know I drive it more." At the time I laughed too. Now I realize he wasn't joking. He was claiming ownership long before he ever had a right to. 2 months before the wedding, something started changing. He became distant. His phone was suddenly always face down. He began working late more often. He snapped over tiny things. One night I asked him gently if he was okay. His reaction hit me like a slap. "I'm trying to fix my life here, Ashley," he said coldly. "Not everyone has everything handed to them like you." That sentence cut deep. Nothing in my life had been handed to me. I'd worked double shifts through college, paid off loans, built everything step by step. But I convinced myself he was just stressed. I told myself relationships required patience. I ignored the unease growing inside me. Then came that Wednesday afternoon. I left work early because of a migraine that made my vision blur at the edges. When I pulled into the driveway, the first thing I noticed was the empty space where my car should have been. At first I didn't think much of it. He often took it for errands. But when I walked inside, the house felt wrong. Too still, too silent, like it didn't belong to us anymore. That's when I saw the envelope on the kitchen counter. It was already opened. Something about that alone felt unsettling. Daniel never left paperwork lying around. I picked it up. Inside was a printed document. It looked like a formal introduction sheet, the kind families exchange when arranging meetings. At the top, in bold letters, I saw words that made my stomach drop. Introduction meeting, Daniel Harper and prospective bride's family. I stared at it, unable to process what I was reading. My hands began shaking so badly the paper rattled. I checked the date. It was today. The time was less than half an hour away. The location was a restaurant across town. My first instinct was denial. I told myself it had to be some mistake. Maybe it was for someone else. Maybe he was helping a friend. Maybe it was business-related. But deep down there was a voice inside me whispering the truth, and it was impossible to ignore. I didn't cry, I didn't call him, I didn't scream or throw anything. Instead, something cold settled inside me, a calm so sharp it almost scared me. I grabbed my spare keys and drove straight to that restaurant. The entire way there, my heart pounded so hard it felt like it was echoing inside my skull. Every red light felt endless. My hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. I kept thinking, please let this be a misunderstanding, please let me be wrong. But when I pulled into the parking lot, my breath caught. There it was. My car, parked right at the front entrance like it belonged there, like it wasn't mine at all. I stepped out slowly, my legs feeling strangely numb. The air felt heavy and thick around me. Each step toward the restaurant felt unreal, like I was moving underwater. Through the glass window, I saw him. Daniel was sitting at a table across from a young woman and two older people who looked like her parents. He was smiling, that same charming smile everyone loved, the one I had fallen for. He leaned forward, speaking animatedly. At one point he laughed, reaching to adjust the sleeve of his shirt like he was trying to impress them. Then the girl's mother pointed outside toward the parking lot. And Daniel turned, proudly gesturing toward my car. I couldn't hear his words, but I could read his lips clearly enough to understand what he was saying. That's my car. The world didn't just crack in that moment, it shattered. I felt something inside me collapse so completely, it left an emptiness that was almost physical. My chest tightened, my throat burned, and yet no tears came. I stood there watching him lie about a life I had built, watching him present himself as someone he was, watching him erase me entirely as if I had never existed. In that moment, one truth settled deep in my bones. I wasn't just being betrayed. I was being replaced. And as I stood there staring through that glass, one thought formed in my mind with chilling clarity. He had just taken the most valuable thing I gave him and used it to audition for another woman's life. What he didn't know yet was this. He had just handed me the perfect weapon to destroy his. And I was about to use it. I stood there for what felt like hours, even though it couldn't have been more than a few minutes. My body felt strangely detached, like I was watching someone else's life unfold instead of my own. Inside the restaurant, Daniel leaned back in his chair, smiling confidently, nodding as the older man across from him spoke. He looked relaxed, proud, completely comfortable. Like he wasn't engaged to someone else. Like he hadn't built a future with me. Like I didn't exist. At one point, the girl beside him laughed softly and tucked her hair behind her ear. Daniel's gaze softened when he looked at her. It was a look I knew too well. It was the same expression he used when he first proposed to me. That's when something inside my chest tightened so sharply it hurt to breathe. I had spent years building my life carefully, responsibly, patiently, and here he was, casually rewriting it, pretending he was the one who owned everything I had worked for. But the most humiliating part wasn't even the cheating. It was watching him claim my car as his own. The symbol of my independence. My hard work. My stability. He wasn't just replacing me, he was using my success to make himself look successful. That realization did something strange to me. The pain didn't disappear, but it changed shape. It hardened, it sharpened. I stopped feeling like a victim and started thinking like someone who had just been handed proof. I didn't storm inside, I didn't confront him. That would have given him the chance to lie, to twist the story, to play the victim. He was good at that, I had seen it before. Instead, I quietly took out my phone. And I started recording. I filmed him through the glass as he laughed, shook the father's hand, and gestured proudly toward the parking lot again. I zoomed in just enough to catch the moment his lips moved, forming the words I already knew. My cars. My hands trembled slightly as I recorded, but my mind was clear, crystal clear. This wasn't just betrayal anymore. This was fraud. I stayed there until I saw them stand up. Daniel walked beside the girl, leaning slightly toward her, talking in that soft tone he used when he wanted to seem attentive. Then something happened that nearly knocked the air out of me. He reached for her hand, and she let him hold it. They walked together toward the door, toward the parking lot, toward the car that legally belonged to me. I stepped behind a nearby pillar, watching silently as they approached. My pulse hammered in my ears, every nerve in my body felt alive. Daniel opened the passenger door for her, smiling like he was some kind of perfect gentleman. Her parents watched approvingly. He walked around to the driver's side and got in. The engine started. For a brief second I imagined walking up, banging on the window, dragging him out in front of everyone. The image flashed through my mind vividly, the shock on his face, the humiliation. But then another thought replaced it. That would be quick, emotional, messy, and far too easy for him. No, he didn't deserve a scene. He deserved something slower, something precise, something he couldn't talk his way out of. So instead, I did something simple. I called the police. My voice was calm when I spoke, almost eerily calm. I reported that my car had been taken without permission and that I had just seen the person driving it. I gave them the license plate number, the location, everything. Then I waited. It didn't take long. About 15 minutes later, as I stood across the street watching, flashing blue lights appeared at the far end of the road. Daniel's car, my car, had just turned onto the main street when the police vehicle pulled up behind him. I saw the brake lights flicker. The car slowed. Then it stopped. From where I stood, I could see Daniel step out. His posture was tense, confused. He kept gesturing toward himself as the officer spoke to him. Even from a distance, I could tell he was trying to charm his way out of it. His hands moved expressively. He nodded repeatedly. He smiled nervously. But then the officer asked for documents. And that's when everything changed. Because the registration didn't have his name on it. The insurance didn't have his name on it. The ownership didn't have his name on it. Everything pointed to me. I saw the moment realization hit him. His shoulders stiffened. His head snapped toward the car. His expression shifted from confusion to something darker. Panic. The girl stepped out of the passenger side, her face pale. Her parents remained inside, staring out the windows in shock. And then, right there on the roadside, Daniel did something that made my stomach twist with a mixture of anger and bitter satisfaction. He pulled out his phone and called me. I watched it happen from across the street as my own phone vibrated in my hand. I didn't answer immediately. I let it ring. And ring. And ring. I wanted him to feel the same helplessness I had felt when I stood outside that restaurant watching him erase me from his life. Finally, I answered. His voice exploded through the speaker. Ashley, what is going on? Why are the police saying this car is reported stolen? I stayed silent for a moment, just long enough for the tension to stretch tight. Then I spoke calmly. Because it is. There was a pause on the other end, a stunned silence. Then he laughed nervously. Stop playing games, you know I use this car all the time. My voice didn't rise, it didn't shake. Yes, I said quietly. You used it today to take another woman to meet her parents. You used it while telling them it was yours. Another silence fell. He stopped breathing audibly. How do you know that? He whispered. I looked straight at him across the street as I answered. Because I watched you do it. And in that moment, even from a distance, I saw his head slowly turn. Until his eyes landed directly on me. The expression on his face wasn't just fear. It was the dawning realization that he had underestimated me completely. And he had just made the worst mistake of his life. Because he still had no idea that what I was planning next would destroy far more than just his reputation. He froze when he saw me. Even from across the street, I could see the exact second it hit him. His shoulders went rigid, his jaw tightened. The confident, charming man who had just been laughing minutes earlier vanished completely. What stood there now was someone exposed, cornered, small. He whispered my name into the phone like it physically hurt him. Ashley, please, we need to talk. I didn't move closer. I didn't raise my voice. I simply watched him while I spoke, my tone steady and cold. There's nothing left to talk about, Daniel. He swallowed hard. I could see him packing slightly, running a hand through his hair the way he always did when he was losing control. This isn't what you think, he said quickly. I was just helping a friend. It's a misunderstanding. For a second I almost laughed. Even now, even while standing next to a police officer, even while being caught red-handed. He was still trying to lie. You told them the car was yours, I replied calmly. You held her hand, you were meeting her parents, you were introducing yourself as a future husband. His voice cracked slightly. You don't understand the situation. No, I said quietly, I understand it perfectly. There was a long silence on the line. Then he whispered something that sent a strange chill through me. You're going to ruin my life. I took a slow breath, my fingers tightened around my phone. You already ruined it yourself, I said. I'm just making sure you don't ruin mine too. Then I hung up. I watched as the officer continued speaking to him. Daniel tried to explain, pointing toward me, clearly asking if he could come over. The officer shook his head. He kept talking, asking questions, writing notes. And for the first time since I had met him, Daniel looked powerless. Not charming. Not confident. Not in control. Just exposed. And something inside me, something that had been crushed and bleeding all afternoon, finally felt a flicker of relief. But that relief didn't last long. Because standing there watching him panic, I realized something important. This moment wasn't enough. Being stopped by the police, being embarrassed in front of that girl's family, that was temporary. He would recover. He would twist the story. He would find a way to make himself the victim. He always did. And I knew him well enough to understand one thing with absolute certainty. If I didn't finish this properly, he would come back into my life somehow. Manipulating, blaming, begging. Or worse, pretending nothing had happened. No, I wasn't going to let that happen. So while he stood there arguing with the officer, I quietly opened my phone again. And I began sending messages. Not emotional ones, not dramatic ones. Factual ones. I sent the video I had recorded to his parents. To my parents. To our shared friend group. And most importantly, to his employer. Along with a single sentence. This is the man you trust with clients and financial decisions. I watched the screen as the messages delivered one by one. Each tiny checkmark felt like a door closing permanently behind him. About 10 minutes later, I saw Daniel's phone start vibrating non-stop in his hand. He looked down at it, and the color drained from his face so quickly it was almost shocking. He opened one message, then another, then another. His hands began shaking. He looked around wildly, then back at me across the street. And this time, the expression on his face wasn't just panic. It was fear. Real fear. Because he understood exactly what was happening. His lies weren't private anymore. They weren't something he could control. They were spreading. Fast. I saw him try to call me again. My phone lit up with his name. I didn't answer. Instead, I watched as he stepped away from the officer, running both hands over his face like he was trying to wake up from a nightmare. The girl who had been sitting in the car stepped out again. She looked at him, confused and upset. Her parents followed, speaking to each other in tense voices. One of them pointed sharply toward him. Even from across the street, I could tell what was happening. They were realizing everything. The lies. The deception. The fact that he wasn't who he claimed to be. Daniel tried to explain, his hands moving frantically, but they didn't listen. The girl shook her head, her face flushed with anger and embarrassment. Her father turned away completely. And just like that, the life he had been trying to build behind my back collapsed right in front of him. I should have felt triumphant, but what I felt instead was something deeper. A strange, heavy calm. Like a storm had finally passed through me and left everything quiet in its wake. Because in that moment, watching him stand alone on the roadside, while every lie he had told unraveled, I realized something important. This wasn't revenge anymore. This was justice. And yet, as I turned to walk back toward my car, one thought lingered in my mind. He still hadn't faced the worst part of what was coming. Because the truth was, the car wasn't the biggest thing he had tried to steal from me. And what he had taken, I was about to take back in a way he would never recover from. As I drove away, my hand stayed steady on the steering wheel, but inside something heavy was shifting. Not breaking, not exploding, just settling, like dust after a collapse. For weeks, maybe months, I had felt something was wrong. That quiet tension in my chest. The restless nights where I would wake up at 3 a.m. staring at the ceiling, feeling like something in my life was slipping through my fingers. Now I knew why. Because the man I had trusted most wasn't just lying to me. He had been building an exit plan from my life, while still using everything I had built to support himself. And that realization changed something fundamental inside me. It wasn't just heartbreak. It was clarity. When I got home, the house felt different than it had earlier that day. It didn't feel hollow anymore. It felt like a place that belonged to me again, like the air itself had been cleaned. I sat down at the kitchen table, the same place where I had found that envelope hours earlier. The paper was still lying there. I picked it up again and looked at Daniel's name printed neatly beside the words prospective groom. My fingers tightened around it slowly. That word used to make me feel warmth, excitement, safety. Now it felt like a lie, so deep it almost made me nauseous. I didn't rip the paper, I didn't crumple it. Instead, I placed it flat on the table, took out my phone, and photographed it carefully. Because by then, I wasn't thinking emotionally anymore. I was thinking strategically. That evening, Daniel came home. Or at least he tried to. I heard his key turn in the lock around 8 o'clock, but it didn't open. I had already changed the electronic access code. The old key was useless without it. A few seconds later, my phone lit up. He was calling again. I let it ring once before answering. His voice was hoarse, drained, nothing like the confident tone he used earlier that afternoon. "Ashley, please, just open the door." I leaned back in my chair, staring at the closed entrance across the room. "No," I said calmly. There was a long pause, then he exhaled shakily. "Everything has been ruined," he whispered. "My parents saw the video, my boss called me, they suspended me. That girl's family is threatening legal action for deception. You've destroyed everything." I listened quietly. Then I said something that made him fall silent. "No, Daniel, you destroyed everything the moment you decided to replace me while still living off me." His breathing grew heavier. I could hear the desperation creeping into his voice. "I was under pressure, you don't understand, I needed stability. Her family is wealthy, they could have helped me rebuild." Those words hit like ice water. Not because they hurt, but because they confirmed everything. I wasn't just betrayed emotionally. I had been treated like a stepping stone, a temporary support system, a resource to use until something better came along. And in that moment, any lingering softness inside me disappeared completely. "You didn't just betray me," I said quietly. "You tried to replace me using the very life I built. You used my money, my home, my car, my reputation, and you thought I would never find out." His voice cracked. "I made a mistake." "No," I replied, "you made a series of choices." Silence filled the line. Then he asked in a low, fearful tone, "What do you want from me?" I took a slow breath before answering. "I want my life back completely." He didn't understand at first. I could hear the confusion in his voice. "What does that mean?" "It means," I said calmly, "you will sign the financial release documents I prepared. You will remove your name from any shared accounts. You will return every item you bought using my money, and you will do it quietly." There was a long pause. Then he whispered, "And if I do?" I looked at the folder sitting beside me on the table. Inside were printed screenshots, financial records, messages, proof of everything he had done. "If you don't," I said evenly, "I pursue legal charges for fraud and financial exploitation, and you already know I have the evidence." The silence that followed felt heavy and absolute. Finally he spoke again. His voice was small. "You planned all this today." I stared at the wall for a moment before answering. "No," I said softly, "I just stopped ignoring what you've been doing for months." That night he didn't argue. He didn't shout. He didn't threaten. For the first time since I had known him, Daniel accepted that he had lost control completely. Within 2 weeks everything was finalized. He signed the documents, transferred back the money he could, returned what remained of the things he had taken. He moved out of my life as quietly as he had tried to move out of my future. But the real ending didn't happen on paper. It happened months later. I was at a cafe one afternoon when I saw him across the street. He looked different, thinner, tired, like someone who had been stripped of the image he once depended on. He saw me too. For a moment our eyes met. He didn't smile, he didn't wave. He just looked down and walked the other way. And in that simple moment, I felt something I hadn't expected. Not anger. Not satisfaction. Just freedom. Because the truth was, the greatest revenge wasn't exposing him. It wasn't the humiliation he faced. It wasn't even the life he lost. The greatest revenge was this. I walked away with everything that mattered. My dignity, my independence, my future. And he walked away with nothing but the consequences of his own choices. So if you're listening to my story right now and you're in that painful place where betrayal feels like it's suffocating you, remember this. People who try to replace you while standing on the life you built aren't taking something from you. They're revealing exactly why they never deserved to be there in the first place. Thank you for staying with me through this story. If you believe in standing up for yourself, in choosing dignity over silence, make sure you stay connected, because sometimes the quietest revenge is simply refusing to let someone keep what they never earned.